From pop culture to politics, this is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. And it may be the greatest nation, but it's also a nation that is greatly depressed and worried and anxious and on edge about its future, both the immediate future and the long-term future. There is a stunning new Gallup poll just released, which found when they asked Americans, do you think the nation's founders, Jefferson and Franklin and George Washington and Adams, do you think that the founders of this country would be disappointed by the way the U.S. has turned out? CNN also spoke with descendants of Jefferson, Franklin, and other founding fathers who have plenty to say about the state of the nation. Okay, but 77% of Americans, which is a stunning number. Think about that. 77% of our citizens in this country believe that the founders would be disappointed by the way the U.S. has turned out. More than 3/4 of Americans think the country's founders would be disappointed with the U.S. today. That according to a Gallup poll released this week. One of 7 new surveys spotlighting the public's complicated feelings about the nation's legacy as it approaches its 250th anniversary. How many people believe that Americans believe that the signers of the Declaration of Independence would be pleased by the way the U.S. has developed and turned out? 19%. Less than 1 out of 5 believe that the founders, the great people who we celebrate and should celebrate on this 4th of July, the sense that people have where you have almost 80% of Americans think they would be disappointed. And by the way, that's not because slavery is gone. It's in spite of the fact that slavery is gone. People like John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, who are named here, considered slavery a great evil. And it is enormously to our nation's credit to have gone through the suffering and the death and the devastation of our greatest war, of the Civil War, for the purpose of getting rid of slavery definitively. The pessimism about the country is bipartisan, they report on CNN. The idea that people believe the founders would be disappointed in the way America's turned out, while Republicans take a slightly less dispirited view than Democrats, across party lines, across lines of economic status and educational level, across the board, there are fewer than 1/4 across party lines who think the founders would be pleased. Gallup has been asking this question since 1999, and the latest reading is the most pessimistic yet. But as they point out at CNN, publicizing this new poll, the public's view isn't all negative. Around 7 in 10 Americans say that over the past 250 years, the country has had at least a fair amount of success in achieving its founding ideals. See, the terminology is wrong because a nation is not static. You don't achieve your founding ideals and then stop. You pursue your founding ideals and keep getting closer and keep getting closer and keep doing more. And for instance, it is an epic achievement that the United States of America, and joined by our allies, destroyed the evil empire and rid the world of the true danger of communist tyranny, which we have defeated almost entirely. And I know you can talk about Zoran Mamdani and the radicals, the socialists who won in New York State, but that is not the equivalent of Soviet communism or the equivalent of Islamic radicalism and terrorism. And there's an encouraging news item on this from The Hill. A senior ISIS leader has been killed, which is good news. The U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, announced yesterday that U.S. military forces killed a senior Islamic State leader in an airstrike in northwest Syria last week. The Hill's Ellen Mitchell reported on this killing. The strike liquidated Ali Hussein al-Ulaiwi, who is part of an ongoing U.S. effort to disrupt and eliminate terrorists who are seeking to attack Americans abroad or even here on the U.S. homeland. That was the statement from CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said the U.S. and its allies remain committed to rooting out remaining remnants of the militant group. And speaking of militant groups and safety and security for the United States, President Trump has let it be known today that he considers it a top priority to finish the border wall by the end of his term. And he is stepping up efforts on multiple fronts to meet that goal. It's an enormous task, reports CNN, that will require the administration to build around 775 miles of new wall, by the end of 2027, and several hundred more miles of secondary and waterborne barriers by the end of 2028. One hurdle among many is land acquisition, as extending the wall requires seizing privately owned land, particularly in Texas. And guess what? Not everybody in Texas is eager to see the seizure of their privately owned land. And meanwhile, this idea, which is also encouraging, the head of the United Nations Nuclear Watchdog Agency said yesterday that its inspectors would visit Iran's nuclear facilities as part of the oversight process that is a key component of the Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Iran. Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the organization, noted that language in the agreement to end the war called for the International Atomic Energy Agency to oversee down-blending of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. The U.S. and Iran had previously offered contradictory statements on the UN watchdog's involvement in the assessment, with Trump stating Tuesday that Iran had agreed to the highest level of nuclear inspection, while Iran claimed there were no plans to allow inspectors into Iran. Now, apparently, that position has changed. Speaking of positions changing, there was a vote earlier this week, as you may remember, a big and important vote where by the narrowest of margins, by a vote of 50 votes for and 48 votes against, the U.S. Senate passed a War Resolution Act that ordered President Trump to end the war against Iran. The president was not happy about this. And a meeting yesterday, which we talked about, the meeting was private, behind closed doors, but apparently President Trump was absolutely furious. We will get to that. And on the Michael Medved Show, okay, is it a good thing if a U.S. senator describes the President of the United States as coming in smoking hot to a cluster beep meeting and comparing that meeting to an episode out of Euphoria. No, it's not a good thing. We will get to that. President Trump has been in alternating celebratory and furious moods. And that has to do, of course, with provocations to the President of the United States. There are two legal decisions breaking today, one of which definitely does not please Trump, and the other one that almost certainly does. Okay, first of all, the negative federal court decision. A federal court in Massachusetts struck down crucial components of an executive order from President Trump that sought to place significant restrictions on mail voting, as those restrictions that President Trump wanted to apply were declared by the court in Massachusetts as unlawful, null, and void. The order by President Trump had in part tried to use federal oversight of the U.S. Postal Service to discourage mail voting. The ruling from Judge Indira Talwani amounted to a broad rejection of the Trump administration's attempts to change federal election procedures through an executive order, repeatedly emphasizing that the Constitution grants authority over elections, not to the executive branch, not to the President of the United States, but to individual states and, yes, to Congress. In her decision, Judge Talwani wrote that the Constitution does not grant the president any specific powers over elections, adding emphasis by underlining the words "does not." And those words are pretty clear in the Constitution when you look at the document. Now, there was another case that was handed down by the Supreme Court, so it's definitive, and this is today. The Supreme Court said that the Trump administration can turn away migrants who are seeking asylum along the U.S.-Mexico border by simply physically preventing them from entering into the United States as they seek protection from persecution. So what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to wait at the border or settle, at least temporarily at the border, while they apply for permission to enter the United States on the basis of physically wanting to get away from persecution, immediate persecution. The administration had asked the court to permit the government to revive a policy first used in his first term in 2016 as part of President Trump's first-term immigration crackdown. Under that so-called turn-back policy, the government had stopped asylum seekers from setting foot on U.S. soil because once you set foot on U.S. soil, federal law would have entitled them to claim asylum and receive protections. What this is saying is that before you actually set foot on that the U.S. soil, that you must first make your case and get permission. And this is not an unexpected result. It is one of those areas where President Trump, I'm sure, is going to do everything he can to implement the turn back policy and to make it work again. This goes along with the drive to finish the border wall. Okay, meanwhile, I mentioned the anger that President Trump felt yesterday with a luncheon meeting with the Republican members of the U.S. Senate, and almost all of them were part of the meeting. Trump was in a better mood, speaking at the National Mall, speaking as part of a Freedom 250 celebration. And he said this about what is coming up on the 4th of July. This is clip 18.
Then on July 4th, we will have the greatest show of all on the National Mall. Your favorite president will be speaking. So please show up. Because if we have 2 empty seats, you know what's going to happen? The fake news is going to say he didn't fill out the arena. No, I'll be speaking. I'll be very proudly speaking as we ring in our 250th year with the largest fireworks display in world history, 10 times larger than any that we've ever done in Washington or in the United States.
Your favorite president will be speaking. Well, does that mean that whoever your favorite president is, you'll have a different president speaking? No. It's supposed to mean that we all know that President Trump is everyone's favorite president, right? And the idea of the largest fireworks display in the history of the world, he doesn't mention, of course, that I think it was the Chinese who get credit for inventing fireworks. But let us hope that there are safety precautions of very rigorous intensity that will protect anything from going wrong. And on a speech in a National Mall, talking about the achievements of the Trump administration leading up to America 250, he couldn't resist bringing up one of his favorite issues, which has to do with transgender identity. We'll play what Mr. Trump has to say about that and some of his claims of accomplishment, because he was outspoken today. And we will also go to some of the details from what Senator Kennedy of Louisiana called a cluster beep meeting, like an episode out of Euphoria. What happened? Oh, Trump was angry because the Senate had passed a bill that they can't really enforce. A bill had passed a resolution that limited President Trump going back to war and ordering further attacks on Iran. And the argument is, and President Trump has a substantive argument here, that if he has no ability to order further attacks or further violence, then it undermines his negotiating position with the Iranians. We will get to that and more coming up.
The Michael Medved Show.
Listen.
Nationwide.
Listen.
And around the world at michaelmedved.com.
And listen.
And on the Michael Medved Show, a report and an update from the Washington Post that the Senate rejected a resolution last night to block President Donald Trump from resuming the war with Iran after he complained that the passage of a similar resolution on Tuesday undermined ongoing negotiations with Tehran over its nuclear program. The resolution on the late night procedural vote last night was 50 to 47 negative. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, not to be confused with his colleague, Senator Kennedy of Louisiana, but Bill Cassidy, who voted with the Democrats for Tuesday's resolution, flipped and voted against advancing this one. Senator Rand Paul, who has voted for every previous resolution since the war started to end the war, voted present rather than directly opposing Trump. My opinion on the debate over war and executive power has not changed, and I have voted that way several times, Paul wrote on X. But since hostilities seem to be over, and the president asked me personally to give consideration to his negotiating position, I will do so. My vote of present is a way to give the president more space and leverage to negotiate a lasting peace. So this time, Bill Cassidy and Rand Paul, who had voted positive on the resolution limiting President Trump's options, they flipped, one of them voting negative this time. That would be Senator Cassidy, who lost his primary because Trump had supported his rival. And Senator Paul, who's had a complicated relationship with President Trump and the White House, also didn't register his vote. Mitch McConnell is still in the hospital. Senator McCormick of Pennsylvania was there this time. So this time the Republicans won by 3 votes, with only 2 Republicans, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, who voted with Democrats to advance the resolution. One Democrat, of course, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, voted against the resolution. But the vote on the previous resolution, which had been positive, left President Trump furious. And Senator Kennedy of Louisiana told Fox News what it was like when the president arrived at the luncheon that was taking place with the Republican senators. This is clip 20.
The Iran War Powers Act.
Well, we won it last night. I'm much relieved. You have to understand what these resolutions are. They're resolutions by the Democrats to direct the president to cut and run in Iran. And day before yesterday, one of them passed. And that's why our meeting with the president was like an episode out of Euphoria. He came in smoking hot. And I'm not talking about his looks. I mean, put yourself in his position. He's negotiating with Iran, and all of a sudden, Congress, with Republicans' help, pulls the rug out from under. But we got it straight last night, and I'm very, very pleased. I don't know. I think they're making progress in Iran. We'll know in 60 days.
Okay, we'll know in 60 days, and let us hope that there is a successful resolution with something done, as President Trump has promised repeatedly, to make sure that Iran never successfully develops a nuclear arsenal. The other accounts of the meeting that took place indicate that a shouting match took place between President Trump and some of the senators, particularly Senator Bill Cassidy, who is leaving the Senate. But Trump berated the 4 Republicans who voted for Tuesday's resolution. He berated them publicly and privately, writing on social media that they, quote, provided aid and comfort to the enemy. He questioned why any Republican would vote for such a resolution during a closed-door lunch with Senate Republicans, which led to a shouting match with Senator Cassidy. Senator John Kennedy, who we just heard from, described Trump as mad as a murder hornet. He does use colorful language. I'd never heard that expression before. Put yourself in his shoes, Kennedy told reporters. He's right in the middle of delicate negotiations, and the Senate votes to get out of Iran. Well, now the Senate has voted not to tell him to get out of Iran and not to tell him anything, but basically to leave the negotiations in his hands. Cassidy, who pressed Trump during the lunch on why the war had dragged on so long, said Vice President J.D. Vance and Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, briefed him Wednesday afternoon. And Senator Cassidy said, I appreciate the quick invitation to the White House to address many of my concerns. Tim Kaine, who is the senator from Virginia, the Democratic senator from Virginia, who's been leading the fight for these congressional resolutions. He said the vote is of no consequence and does not undo the express position of Congress that further war against Iran is illegal unless Congress votes for it, Kaine said in a statement. But Trump immediately hailed it as a victory, thanking Senators Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Bernie Moreno of Ohio and Thune, the Senate minority leader, on social media for their efforts. This vote puts Iran on notice. There's another statement in his speech at the National Mall, getting ready for the big celebration on July 4th at the National Mall. Trump in that speech claimed a achievement that may be a little more than a little bit controversial. This is President Trump, clip 16 on the National Mall.
And we got critical race theory out of our schools. And I signed the largest expansion of school choice in history. And we have begun the process of abolishing the Federal Department of Education. Thank you, Linda. Because we're sending education back to the states where it belongs. We banned the transgender mutilation of children. And we made it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. We got men out of women's sports. We renamed the Gulf of Mexico after 350 years. They are 100 years older than we are. We named the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and restored the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it belongs.
Do you remember that one? McKinley was called, renamed Denali. And this is another one of those fights where do we have an addiction of just fighting too much over stuff that doesn't really matter? And that really shouldn't be the government's decision. It should be the decision of individual citizens and sometimes states and localities. We'll get to more on that coming up on the Medved Show. It's always an honor to welcome back to the show Jonathan Allen, who is a senior political reporter for NBC News. He is also a triumphal best-selling author of books about politics, including HRC, Shattered, and Lucky, bestsellers all. And he has a new column which raises the point that polls show that America at 250 is riven with doubt and pessimism, but with glimmers of hope. Jonathan, let me begin with a two-part question very quickly. Why the doubt and pessimism, and what are those glimmers of hope, and how can we magnify them?
Well, I think the doubt and pessimism stems from, more than anything, a feeling among many Americans that it's a lot harder, and the poll shows this, a lot harder to get ahead now than it used to be. And those numbers are overwhelming. You're looking at 7 to 8 out of 10 Americans that think that it's harder to get ahead now than it used to be a generation ago. And interestingly, that's across economic groups. The younger people feel it most acutely, but even baby boomers, senior citizens feel like it's harder than it used to be. So that's part of it. And you see that reflected in some of the other data. 58% say America's best days are behind it. 38% say America's best days are ahead of it. I think there's just a real sense that the American dream is slipping away or has slipped away. Now, the glimmer of hope, I want to get to that silver lining because we have such division in our country, is a small majority. I think 54% in the poll say that we share more values in common than the things that divide us. And I was surprised to see that the majority said that because we are inundated with information about just how much we all seem to dislike each other.
And the fact that we all seem to dislike each other, well, one of the things that there tends to be a general admiration for the founders of this country. There's a new Gallup poll that came out today that we've talked about earlier on the show today, which shows that 77% of respondents to this poll across every political, age, economic, educational line, racial line, 77% of everybody believes that the founders of this country would be disappointed at the way America has turned out. What do you think so powerfully disorients people to reach that conclusion?
I think it's easy to feel disappointed, and to look back, a couple hundred years in history and say, look at these giants that gave us this country, and we're not living up to it. I think each of us has an ideal for what America should look like, and what it does look like is a mosaic of the pragmatism and the choices that are made as a group, and so it doesn't fit anyone's singular vision of what we should be at any given moment. That said, I'm not sure that we have a lot of Jeffersons and Hamiltons and Madisons, wandering around our political battlefields these days. I think it's also easy to look around and say, and probably correct to say that a lot of folks who are elected to office these days are not the giants of the founding era, are not people who think about, how to have a stable and prosperous republic in the sort of 30,000 foot view that those philosopher politicians thought of. I mean, today it's about how many hours can you put in on the fundraising call, how many ads can you run, and a little bit less about how do you preserve the essential nature of American democracy.
You also write about Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, who had a very, very successful primary on Tuesday. He had a contested primary. He got 80% of the vote in his drive for re-election. And he is now viewed, as you write, Jonathan Allen, he is now viewed as a realistic possibility as a presidential candidate. What makes him special in that regard?
Well, I think it starts with the whisperers of the Democratic Party saying that, right? I mean, the political insiders, the operatives, the other politicians look at him and they say, here's a guy with some skills. He is, he's attractive. He speaks well. He does the stump speech thing better than most.
He's a holder of a Bronze Star from his service for the armed forces.
He is now. There was some controversy over that. He actually, when he applied to a White House fellowship during the Obama administration, claimed the Bronze Star. He had apparently been submitted for it, but had not won it. And then he had to be resubmitted in 2024, and he was awarded that Bronze Star right before Joe Biden left office. So he is a winner of the Bronze Star, absolutely a veteran of the war in Afghanistan, of the decoration. He's somebody who went to war. And he is somebody who is winning easily, right? I mean, I think any governor is somebody that's going to get at least a quick look, and Wes Moore has some of those, I don't want to say inimitable, but some of those political skills that are natural, that are, sort of some people are born with. And so he's looked at that way as a potential presidential candidate or a vice presidential candidate, depending on who the Democratic nominee is. He will certainly be somebody who is mentioned for that if he is not the eventual Democratic nominee. And of course, he has said he's not going to run for president, or he said he's not running for president. But we've heard those Sherman-esque statements before, including from Barack Obama just months before he announced his presidential bid, that he was not going to run. He said that on Meet the Press on NBC in early 2006. By 2007, he was standing at the Capitol in Springfield, Illinois, announcing that he was running.
Is there anybody else who occurs to you on either side of the Republican-Democratic divide who could surprise people as a viable candidate for president?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the Democrats are going to have a whole lot of people run, and obviously the big names are kind of out there: Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, et cetera. I think that there's a congressman from California, Ro Khanna, who is looking to occupy that sort of Bernie Sanders lane, if you will, in the Democratic Party. And there's not somebody who is a natural heir. So that's an open question as to, who the candidate of the left is in the Democratic Party. And the Democrats for generations now really had that left-center divide. In almost every presidential nomination contest, it comes down to the centrist versus the liberal. And so I think Khanna has a shot at that. There are some others. If Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez runs, she might occupy that lane. And then on the Republican side, the name that I don't hear as much that I think would be a fascinating candidate is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas.
And what about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, other than the fact that she's remembered as a press secretary for President Trump?
Well, she starts with good name identification. She starts with at least the positive feeling from Trump and Trump world. And connections, of course, to the establishment. Her father, for a long time, the Arkansas governor, the head of the Republican Governors Association. So maybe the ability to straddle both of those, camps. Well,
I can tell you, her father, the ambassador to Israel, is extraordinarily popular in Israel. He's one of the most unifying figures in Israeli politics. I don't know if that helps or hurts.
Yeah, I'm not sure these days. In the Republican primary, I think it probably still helps. I think it might be more difficult on the Democratic side right now. But the other thing about her is that she seems to have governed Arkansas pretty competently. So she was a press secretary, sort of out front for Trump. And communication skills are one thing, but governance skills are another. Also, we've seen a president come from Arkansas before. It's a state where you have to manage, a sort of broad set of constituencies well in order to be popular. So, look, that's one of my dark horses in terms of somebody who could run for president or maybe end up at the second slot on a ticket.
Well, that again. When you talk about a second slot on the ticket, in terms of the upcoming midterm elections, a wipeout for Democrats or signs of new life?
Yeah, I don't know. I hesitate to predict elections. History suggests, and if you look at the field right now, it suggests the Democrats are in a pretty good place to take the House. But check back with me again in September or October when we get close to voters actually paying more attention.
We will check back with Jonathan Allen. His most recent columns, all informative and important, listed on our website at This Greatest Nation on God's Green Earth.